Who you gonna call? Cinemark to get my goddamn money back. No, but in all seriousness, I did not have high expectations for Frozen Empire. Pretty low expectations, in fact, and it did not even meet those. Like, share, subscribe, comment if you haven't, or don't, I don't care. If you're new here, I post reviews and other stuff a few times a week, so check out the channel. Alright, let's dive into Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. What a mess this franchise is, and I say that discouragingly. The original Ghostbusters was released well before I was born, but it was still very much a staple of my childhood. I was obsessed with that movie growing up, and I still love and appreciate it to this day. It is a fantastically well-constructed comedy. The cast, along with their chemistry, is top-notch. Not to mention how quirky and unique the story is. The follow-up film, Ghostbusters 2, isn't as highly regarded, and I will concede it's not a very good movie. But I love it nonetheless, just for the aforementioned chemistry of the main four Ghostbusters alone. Then came Ghostbusters 2016, a reboot or a remake, or honestly, that movie just isn't anything. It's abhorrent and doesn't deserve to be talked about. We can jump to 2021, with the release of Ghostbusters Afterlife, a sequel to the first two Ghostbuster films, 32 years in the making. The sequel promised to breathe new life into the franchise while bringing back the original cast, except for Harold Ramis' Egon, who has since passed away. Rest in peace. I, among many others, had never been clamoring for another installment in this franchise. I was perfectly content with the existence of the two Ghostbusters films we already had. So I was skeptical after the announcement of Ghostbusters Afterlife, to say the least. And then the teaser trailer dropped with Bill Murray's dialogue as Peter Venkman over top, and I was hooked. Still skeptical, but hooked. And I was pleasantly surprised. Of course they pulled out the nostalgia, of course they utilized a few cheap gimmicks, but it was fun and it still progressed the original story forward. And in the end, I appreciated the creative send-off for Harold Ramis' Egon Spengler. In my view, Afterlife wasn't some groundbreaking sci-fi sequel that set the franchise on a new trajectory it had never seen, but to me, it was always the third and final installment of a trilogy that was always intended to get made. Then they announced a sequel, with a cast comprised of both new and old returning, and I was not interested. Look, the new cast introduced in Afterlife, they're great. I enjoyed all of them. And I know in Afterlife the original cast only appeared for what amounted to an extended cameo, but it fit the story and I didn't mind it. I thought it was a good way to end the franchise, as I stated before. Everyone got closure, but the reason the first two films are so beloved isn't because of thrilling action scenes or thought-provoking narratives. People adore those movies for the cast and how they play off each other. So after we had this touching farewell to Aykroyd, Murray, and Hudson, the thought of bringing them back again for what would be extended cameos once again just did not sit well with me. But I will admit, the trailers for Frozen Empire looked decent. A new threat we haven't seen before, there was even more clips of the original cast, far more than there ever was in the Afterlife marketing. So, I was willing to give it a chance. Of the four Ghostbusters movies, this is by far the worst. It's so dull. Nothing really happens, and once the story actually gets going, there's only about 30 minutes remaining in the runtime. We are introduced to this story's chief supernatural threat mere minutes before he's defeated and the movie ends. We spend so much time just meandering through this world doing nothing. The original cast appears significantly more in this film than in Afterlife, but all three of them somehow have nothing to do. Winston is just like a background player funding the Ghostbusters. Ray still runs his occult shop, and the only purpose he really serves in this film is purchasing an artifact that is connected to our villain, and connecting Phoebe with his library contact to decipher the legend of this monster, something she probably could have done on her own. Then there's Bill Murray's Peter Venkman, arguably the best aspect of the franchise, and he doesn't do anything. And it's fine if they only brought these characters back for cameos, but in this film they attempt this strange balancing act where the original cast, they exist in this weird gray area. It's like the writers and directors wanted them in this film, but then halfway through they decided, maybe not. So now we're just stuck with these weird extended cameo roles where no one has anything much to do, and they just kind of stand around. They even brought back Annie Potts as Janine Mintz, the Ghostbusters' sarcastic and short-tempered secretary, for a role that also serves zero purpose. That's a big problem with this film, is that nobody really does anything. Even the new cast, who is supposed to be the centerpiece of this franchise going forward, none of them except Phoebe really matter to the story at all. They try to craft this overarching narrative of Phoebe struggling to fit in with the family and accepting Gary as her new father figure, and it falls so unbelievably flat. The worst character is by far Kumail Nanjiani's Nadeem, an unaware, sort of aloof, average New York civilian who sells a family heirloom to Ray. Unbeknownst to him, it's a prison for the principal villain monster that his grandmother watched over. He plays this role of sort of the unlikely hero. He teams up with the Ghostbusters and learns to harness a set of powers he never knew he even possessed, in a matter of 5 minutes before the monster's defeated with the help of Phoebe. And the other 10 cast members just stand around and watch this all happen. His character is played for such a joke that it's annoying every time he's on screen, and I like Nanjiani. I will say one good aspect of this film was the villain design. I thought the villain design was fantastic. The problem is that this is the best part of the film, and we spend a total of 2 minutes of screen time with this villain before the climax. This movie is such a mess, and it's so poorly written. The comedy doesn't really hit at all. The original cast, the reason that most people come to these movies, are subjected to just being background stand-ins. The whole movie was just honestly kind of boring. I can't say I ever expected Sony to not just try and keep pumping these movies out just for the profit. But if you're gonna do that, allow us the satisfaction of at least having the perfect send-off for the original characters, and then move on to new territory with a new cast. Ultimately, I think that's the culprit for this movie being so convoluted. It's the studio trying to stuff all of these characters into one film, and none of them really get their due. I wish the studio and the writers would have just let Venkman, Ray, Winston, and Egon walk out into the sunset with some dignity. But it's Sony we're dealing with here. They don't care how bad an idea is, they'll turn it into a buck if they can. Just look at both Venoms, Madam Web, Morbius, the list goes on. Sometimes it's better to just let things be and end it on a high note.